How do you create an nTier application, and what's the benefit of doing so? An nTier application is built by creating just your base web or UI layer using the web application template that's in Visual Studio, but then adding additional class libraries to it to create as separate projects to create different layers. For example, we could have a three-tier application with a web layer, which is the application project, and then two class library projects, one for domain and one for data. And the benefit of that is separating out kind of the responsibilities of each one of those so that things can be reused or accessed. For example, the data layer could contain anything that I used to access my database. For example, repositories or a unit of work pattern. If I used that, my ADMX file, any of my classes, my domain classes that mapped to a database table could all be contained within the database layer because they pertain to the data. The domain layer would contain any classes and methods that were used to process business logic. For example, in a banking application, if information was somebody requested a withdrawal and I needed to check and see if they had the amount of money in their account for the withdrawal, then that business logic could be done. I would pull the amount that is in their checking account from the data layer, pass it down to the domain layer, which would then go through and process and make sure that they had enough money, that they weren't trying to withdraw more than was allowed within a day from that bank, just all the different business logic. And then that would return a value, yes, they can withdraw that, or no, they can't, and then would trigger whatever action was then to happen after that decision was made. So my domain layer could contain all my business logic, and then I'd have the web UI layer, which would be all of the interfaces and the UI that the user would interact with. And the benefit of that is I can take those class libraries and I can actually reuse them. And so things like the domain layer that have all of that application logic, if we are a company that predominantly works with banks, they're going to have a lot of the same functionality. And you may just have to change a couple of parameters, but you don't have to rewrite all of the logic because you can just include a library, a class library from another project and just use that in a secondary, third, fourth application. And so nTier architecture allows reuse, and it just makes it easier for multiple people on a team to work at the same time. You can have one person working on the UI layer while you have a DBA dealing with the data layer and a C# programmer specifically dealing with the domain layer.